The North is no longer quiet. Donald Trump's unease over Canada reveals how the Arctic has become America's next strategic anxiety. For much of modern history, the Arctic has been treated as geography rather than geopolitics. It was a place of maps, not meetings, of ice charts, not crisis briefings. Politicians invoked it rarely, usually when discussing climate change or Indigenous affairs, and never as a front line of power. That era is ending. When Donald Trump returned to the White House for a second term, few expected the frozen North to occupy his attention. Yet after reviving his earlier fixation with Greenland, the American president has now turned his gaze toward Canada. Not with talk of purchase or annexation, but with something far more revealing: doubt. According to American officials quoted by NBC News, Mr. Trump has repeatedly expressed concern that Canada lacks the capacity to defend its northern territories against potential adversaries. Ottawa, he believes, is spending too little on defense. The current Arctic posture, in Washington's view, is insufficient. The language is cautious. The implication is not, there are no plans to buy Canada, officials stress. No intention to deploy American troops there. This is not Greenland redux. But the message is unmistakable. The world's longest undefended border now sits adjacent to one of the most strategically volatile regions on the planet. And the man in the Oval Office is no longer comfortable pretending otherwise. The Arctic, once peripheral, has become central. And Canada, once comfortably invisible in strategic debates, now finds itself uncomfortably exposed. The melting of strategic innocence. Climate change has altered many things, but few are as quietly transformative as the Arctic. As sea ice retreats, what emerges is not merely open water but opportunity and risk. New shipping routes shorten travel between Asia and Europe. Previously unreachable reserves of hydrocarbons and critical minerals have become accessible. Distances between missile trajectories shrink. Early warning times compress. Geography itself begins to work differently. In strategic terms, the Arctic is no longer a blank space. It is a corridor. Russia understood this early. Over the past decade, Moscow has rebuilt Soviet-era bases along its northern coastline, expanded radar networks, modernized airfields, and assembled the world's largest fleet of nuclear-powered icebreakers. The Northern Sea Route, once theoretical, is now operational. For the Kremlin, the Arctic is not a frontier but a flank, one to be fortified. China, though possessing no Arctic territory, has shown equal interest. By declaring itself a near-Arctic state, Beijing has signaled intent rather than entitlement. It has invested in research stations, polar shipping experiments, and satellite coverage. Its approach is patient, bureaucratic and long-term, the kind that unsettles planners precisely because it avoids drama. Against this backdrop, North America's northern shield looks oddly thin. Canada controls the world's second-longest Arctic coastline. Its archipelago sprawls across thousands of kilometers. Its legal sovereignty is uncontested. Its military capability, however, is modest. Much of Canada's Arctic presence remains symbolic: seasonal patrols, aging surveillance systems, sparse infrastructure, and limited rapid response capacity. Sovereignty, in practice, is maintained by law and assumption rather than deterrence. In a slower world, which might have sufficed. In this one, it does not. Why Washington is uneasy. From Washington's perspective, the problem is not that Canada is vulnerable. It is that America would be responsible. The United States and Canada are bound together through NORAD, the Joint Aerospace Defense Command that monitors threats across the continent. An incursion, provocation, or crisis in the Canadian Arctic would not remain a Canadian problem for long. It would immediately become an American one, yet the ability to shape events on the ground would depend on forces Ottawa has not fully built. For decades, this asymmetry was tolerated. Canada was stable, friendly, and strategically predictable. The Arctic was frozen, both literally and politically. No adversary appeared eager to assess the margins. That calculus has changed. In an era of renewed great power rivalry, unguarded space invites interest. And from Mr. Trump's perspective, the idea that America might be compelled to defend territory it does not control, with capabilities it does not command, offends his political instincts. His worldview has always been transactional. Protection is not free. Security is not sentimental. Alliances, in his mind, are arrangements, not vows. This logic animated his first-term disputes with NATO allies, his demands for higher defense spending in Asia, and his repeated insistence that America was being taken advantage of. In his second term, the same thinking has simply migrated north. Canada, long accustomed to strategic quietude, is discovering that proximity to the United States does not guarantee exemption from scrutiny. Not Greenland, but not irrelevant either. The contrast with Greenland is instructive. When Mr. Trump floated the idea of purchasing the vast Arctic island during his first presidency, it was widely mocked. Yet the underlying impulse was strategic. Greenland hosts key American military installations and sits astride transatlantic routes. Its value was real, even if the method was clumsy. Canada, by contrast, cannot be bought. It is too large, too sovereign, too embedded in America's economic and social fabric. Any suggestion of annexation belongs to rhetoric, not policy. Still, rhetoric matters. Mr. Trump's occasional references to Canada as a potential 51st state, delivered half in jest, half in provocation, serve a purpose. They unsettle. They remind Ottawa that Washington does not view the status quo as immutable. Ambiguity is a Trumpian instrument. It costs nothing, offends many, and forces others to react. The administration's message, stripped of theatrics, is straightforward: Canada must do more, or America will begin asking harder questions, not about borders, but about burden. The shadow of China. If Russia provides the military urgency in the Arctic, China supplies the strategic anxiety. American planners increasingly worry not about a sudden northern invasion but about gradual erosion of influence. Ports, logistics hubs, satellite coverage, and scientific cooperation offer pathways for presence without confrontation. The prospect of a region where Russia dominates militarily, China operates economically, and Canada lacks enforcement capability is deeply uncomfortable for Washington. Such a configuration would place two strategic competitors astride the northern approaches to the American continent, without a credible local counterweight. For Mr. Trump, who frames global politics in spatial terms, who controls what, and who pays for it, this is unacceptable. The Western Hemisphere, in his conception, must remain unmistakably American. That does not require confrontation. But it does require capacity, and capacity costs money. Ottawa's narrow corridor, Canada's response has been cautious, even defensive. Prime Minister Mark Carney has reaffirmed commitment to NATO, stressed cooperation with allies, and emphasized that decisions concerning Greenland rest with Denmark and its people. The tone is diplomatic. The dilemma is structural. Canada cannot afford an open clash with the United States. Nor can it ignore growing pressure to invest in Arctic defense. Domestic politics, fiscal constraints, and a long-standing preference for multilateralism complicate every decision, yet geography is not optional. As the Arctic grows more navigable and more contested, inaction itself becomes a choice, one that others may interpret. Ottawa is unlikely to announce a dramatic militarization of the North. But incremental increases, in surveillance, infrastructure, and joint exercises, are increasingly inevitable. Not because Canada seeks confrontation, but because its closest ally does. A colder world, more clearly drawn. What emerges from Mr. Trump's Arctic unease is not isolationism but reordering. The United States is not withdrawing from global commitments. It is redefining them in harder terms. Values matter less. Capabilities matter more. Alliances are judged not by history but by output. In this framework, the Arctic is no longer a peripheral concern delegated to environmental summits and Indigenous councils. It is a strategic arena, shaped by icebreakers rather than ideals. Canada, accustomed to strategic invisibility, is discovering the cost of comfort. Its northern territories, once remote enough to be forgotten, now sit at the intersection of climate, commerce, and competition. The irony is that nothing dramatic has happened there. No shots fired. No flags raised, yet the silence itself has become suspicious. The ice is retreating. The routes are opening. The calculations are shifting, and in Washington, the North is no longer quiet. In geopolitics, empty spaces rarely remain empty for long.